Let me answer a question, and I'm really sorry that I can't remember who asked the question. It was asked in comments, and I'm out here in the middle of nowhere with no computer, and I'm ready to answer the question. I'll do my best. So the question was asked of me, if I were to become a hermit, what type of hermit would I be? That's a really interesting question, because there are lots of different types. There is the old recluse of the woods, the old stodgy old man out there chopping his firewood, who, has basically secluded himself from the world. There's the aesthetic priest living in a cave, hanging upside down from waterfalls and seeking after some spiritual rebirth. There's the Yamabushi mountain warrior who lived in these very mountains where I am at in Japan. These mountains were once filled with, or not filled, although perhaps one or two would be enough to constitute being filled in a mountain like this, given their interest in being alone. The Yamabushi mountain warrior who would seek after a place like this in order to strengthen their moral, spiritual, and warrior resolve. Which would I be? I've given some thought. That's why I'm come to the point where I can answer the question. If I could be a hermit, if I could withdraw from the world, I would choose to be a hermit of the Howling Wild. That's right, a hermit of the Howling Wild. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. You've heard before, I'm sure, that the concept of the Howling Wild. And the wilds do indeed howl. I've heard them 3 times. Never in Japan. Never been in a place where I could hear it. Even in a place like this utterly empty forest. It's just this green decomposition of life, with just endless trees everywhere and the sound of water, and it all looks the same. It's just amazing. Especially up there, look at that, where I'm headed. It's just all dark and bleak. You'd think you could hear the wild howl here, but I can't. No one's howling. The howl is not literal, although I have heard howls of wolves and the yips of coyotes. The howl is something else. Let me stop for just a second, try to explain what I mean about it. I'll give you the anecdotes 3 of the experiences with the howling wilderness. The first was in Minnesota, in a place called the Boundary Waters, roughly 2 or 3 days out from Ely, in the amazing, majestic, pristine boreal forests there. I was with a professor and some students. We were on a school expedition. We had been camped in a very remote spot. I mean, this is a place where there are no people, and you're literally days away from any help. This is long before cell phones, and there'd be no reception out there. You rarely even heard an airplane overhead. Silence was so deafening at sometimes. And one day, we decided to stay in one place for a whole day. And I shared my canoe with a friend of mine. Zach was his name. And I asked Zach if I could have the canoe for the day. And he said, sure. So I hopped in with lunch in my backpack, just like I got my pack here, and headed out. And I've got a good compass in here. I don't get lost easily. And I didn't get lost on this trip, but I did meander. Went around the corner, did a portage over into another lake, and these lakes were just glass, crystal clear. And these are not lakes where these are people. These are lakes where you're really alone. I mean, desperately alone, except for the loons, those magical birds with their and their sounds. I'm doing a bad job, but they were amazing. I went deeper and deeper, farther and farther. Went around a corner where it got really narrow, and dead trees here and there, and it was an eerie type of a place. Farther and farther. Stopped to have my lunch, parked the canoe, and headed off into the woods. Bears out there, wolves out there. This is really remote. I love that kind of stuff. Just like now, all alone. And suddenly a storm came. I didn't have any idea that it was coming. No warning. Suddenly the sky grew dark, the winds picked up, and the rain began to pelt, and I had nothing to protect myself. And made myself back to the canoe and tried to paddle against those winds. And as I was out there, that remote place, paddling up against the wind, the winds, blowing around, the rain crashing down. I had to make my way back because I was still quite a ways out and night was coming and I didn't even have a flashlight. And you do not want to overnight exposed in the boreal forests of Minnesota. You will be consumed, you will be eaten alive by mosquitoes by dawn. They're that bad. They actually it's amazing. They're like something out of a horror movie. So I was trying to make it back, and as I was paddling along, hugging the shore there, trying to go along, suddenly I could hear it, this howl. It wasn't an audible sense. It wasn't something I could actually hear. I could hear the wind. It was this lonely sense of truly being in an abandoned place, in a place so wild and so where a man alone stands truly alone. And I heard that, and it was in here. It was a sound from within, not from without. It was the senses knowing how alone I was that conspired to howl within. And that was the first time I heard the wilderness howl. The second time was in an unexpected place, underwater. I had been, let's walk. It's getting dark, I like it. I had been a spear fisherman and a spear fisher boy since I was little. And at one point in my life I decided to pursue the sport in earnest, and I signed up for lessons with one of the greats in the spearfishing world, Jim Christensen, Big Jim Christensen, Big Jim to those that knew him well. And I attended a 2-day seminar in his place in Los Angeles. We went out into his pool and he demonstrated stuff in his pool. It was an amazing thing. The guy's truly a legend. If you check out the look up Big Jim Christensen on the web, or check out the book Blue Water Hunters, you'll learn all about Big Jim and just what a luminary he was in our world. Anyway, after those 2 days, with a very small group, I think there were 4 of us all, and the students. Big Jim invited us. After we received all that advanced training on spearfishing, and this is serious spearfishing. He invited us to an invitation-only spearfishing event somewhere out on one of the Channel Islands. Well, actually, we weren't going to the Channel Islands. We were going to a place, I think it's called Farnsworth Bank. It's this underwater mountain, 60-some-odd miles off the coast of California. It's a mountain peak that comes up and lays like 50, 60 feet under. The peak is 50, 60 feet below the surface, out in the middle of the ocean out there. We were heading out to the Farnsworth Bank to go fishing after the big yellowtail and anything else big we could find. These guys were serious. They went after bluefin tuna and stuff like that. Big 400, 300-pound fish. We got out to, we left late at night, all night motor out there. Stormy day. Stormy night. Woke up the next morning, the wind was howling, sky was overcast, the waves, whitecaps were everywhere, and we decided to abandon the idea of going to the Farnsworth Bank. It was just too rough. It was literally open ocean. You can't see any land out there. And instead we went to a remote island, and I can't remember which one it was. It may have been San Nicolas Island. I can't quite remember. It was one of those remote islands where few people ever go. And this is my first time spearfishing with an outfit like this. These were pros. And the way that it worked was that they'd drop us off in the water as we went along. And spearfishermen don't want to be near one another. And so they would drop us off at intervals and then anchor the boat or park the boat out there, and so to speak, and we'd have to come in and they'd check in 3 or 4 hours later, and hopefully everybody's on the boat again. And we must have been a mile off the coast of this remote island, windswept, rugged, just amazing coastline. And we're way out there, and there's these scattered kelp beds, really these stalks rising, just like these trees. Stalks rising just like this from the depths. Very, very deep water there, and we were free diving. We didn't have any tanks. And me being a young man and ready to prove my ability, I volunteered to be in the first team that got dropped off. There were no teams. We just first group, one of the very first ones to jump off the boat. I had no idea how these guys worked. I didn't realize that being the first off the boat meant that I would be like half a kilometer away from the boat when it stopped, because it would kind of circuit around and then kind of stop in the middle and dropping down. We were no drivers. I jumped off the boat with my big giant spear gun. It's the size of this thing. It's 3 giant rubber bands with 400 pounds of thrust that could nail it. Had a reel on it, anything. I could take in a big fish with that thing. Jumped off. I was all alone. Put my mask on, so grabbed my gun, looked down. The water's choppy. The boat's taken off. There's nobody in the water with me. The boat's taken off, and I look down, and it's just shafts of light down below, and it wasn't clear. It was kind of murky down there, and these big stalks of kelp like this coming up with little patches at the top, and I could see the big fish down there, the huge calico bass, the size I'd never seen before. And in the distance, barracuda schools moving, and yellowtail. The first time I'd ever seen yellowtail was on that trip. Yellowtail moving, and even bigger hulks off in the distance. Now this is the realm of the big sharks. This is where the great whites live. And in fact, great whites have killed people on this very area. I remember a man who was bitten in half diving in one of those islands, and shortly after that time. So you do have to be wary of that. So here I am. I'm sitting in the water. It's rough. It's tossing. It's turning. The wind is howling, and the boat's moving away, and it ain't stopping. And there's nobody else in the water. Well, I get too busy. You know, I'm not going to be a wimp. I got myself into this. I'm young, I'm strong, I can do it. So I start hunting. And I managed to bag myself a couple of big calico bass. Kind of the kind of thing you're kind of embarrassed to take back to a group like that. I managed to get a couple. I mean, it was hard though, man. I'd swim down, 40 feet, level off with my big gun. And, I usually don't like to spearfish, but I had to do it this time. You don't want to come with nothing, level off with that big gun and fire off and hit a kick on it. Shoot, hit that big calico bass, which would take off, wind itself up in the kelp, and I had a line on it, like a fishing line. So I would go back to the surface, unreeling that line, and, take some air, hyperventilate, back down again, and try to untangle that fish out of there. And I got two big calico bass before I decided to make my way back. And making my back was an arduous procedure. It was way, way out there. And that was about the time that I hanging there in that middle distance out there between the stalks, with the big shapes moving below, and the two dead fish in my bag, and the wind howling above them. I could hear it above, and whistling above. It was amazing. And then it was when I heard it, though my ears were underwater, I heard the wilderness howl underwater. The desolate loneliness of that spot, the isolation, the danger, the extreme vulnerability that I felt at that moment made the wilderness howl. It was just like being in this forest right here. Well, I feel perfectly at home here. Not so in that wilderness, that ocean forest. And I pumped my way back, kicked my way back with those big giant fins of mine. I mean, freedivers have these long fins. You don't swim like this, gentle swooping motions. And I was scared. I made my way back. It was hard. I'd never exerted myself quite like that in the ocean before, and I was scared, and I heard the wilderness howl. That scared me. The wilderness howling, the howling wilderness seems to be, I hear it howl when I'm in danger. But the third time, I don't remember being in danger. I just remember being utterly isolated. And that was the time the wilderness truly howled the loudest, and I think I actually heard it audibly howling, not an animal. I heard the wilds howling. I have my big R1100 GS, which was an enduro bike. You can switch it and take it on or off road. And I had taken it way out into the Mojave Desert and turned off the analog brakes, got the thing geared up for off-road work, and off I went deep into had that big giant gas tank, deep into the desert. Places where just nobody would be. And I was on a giant, almost what's called in geology a peneplain. I think that's Latin, means almost a plane. There are no true peneplains on Earth, I think, at this point. It's a hypothetical, theoretical landscape of worn-down environment, nearly flat, leveling off. Big mountains in the distance that were old, worn mountains. Excuse me. So certainly wasn't a peneplain with the mountains there. Anyway, flat landscape with those hulked mountains in the distance. Nobody, no towns, no houses, no camps, nothing out there. And usually I would go hunker in a valley in one of those mountains and sleep the night. But that night I decided to stay out in the open. I stopped out in that open space, in that life zone of the creosote bushes. I set up my little tent there, and nightfall came on, and I had my meal. The campfire went out. I was so utterly alone out there, and I climbed into my tent and went to sleep. And in the middle of the night, I had to pee. So I got out of my sleeping bag, unzipped the thing, stepped outside, and the moon had come up. And after I did my business, I stepped away from the tent and did my business. I stood there in the moonlight and could see the expanse of that plain, that immense plain, the size of a city. Several cities could be fit in that plain, where just me, in the openness with the wind blowing steadily, rattling my tent, you know, rustling it, not whistling, but rustling it like that, my big bike sitting there. I wasn't scared. I was in awe. Big black mountains over there on the other side. I was truly in awe of what I was seeing. And as I stood there, the wind moving over my body and shaking the tent, and the big hulks in the distance, and the canyons as dark as the sides of the mountains themselves, mystery in there, and the moon overhead, bathing everything in that light, that amazing light, similar to the light above right now, but dimmer. As I stood there, I heard the sound. It was truly an audible sound. It was a howl off in the distance, and I knew that it wasn't real. Although it seems real, I still don't know. I thought to myself, there's no wolves out here. It can't be a wolf. It certainly wasn't a coyote. It wasn't anything like that. It was a howl of the, similar to the wind, but dissimilar also. It was a howl of the wild place. That same howl that I had heard before, you know, hovering in 100 feet of misty water off the coast of that island. It was the same howl that I heard in the boreal forest into that moment of duress in the storm. Although there was no duress, there was no danger. I was safe. I was in the wilderness, and it was doing its thing. It was howling at me from that remote spot. And now I come to the point. If I could be a hermit, if I could venture out and find myself into a hermitage state, I would be the hermit of the Howling Wild. I would choose to seek out, discover, and live amidst those places, to hear that howling, both in my mind and audible upon the landscape that coming from me. That's where I would go. That would be the landscape for me, and that would be the life for me. One that I will never choose, as I have stated in other videos. I will be content to briefly sojourn into these places, and may perhaps never again hear the Howling Wild, but satisfied to have heard it the few times that I have. And with that, folks, as I prepare to portage this river, little stream here in the mountains, I'll say goodbye and wish you all the best in whatever adventures in life you choose. Take care.